What if the perfect Hollywood couple wasn't so perfect after all? What if behind the red carpets, the smiles, and the movie premieres, there was a story of control betrayal, and a plan so twisted it could change everything about how we see them? Tonight, we're peeling back the glossy curtain and uncovering the truth that nobody in Hollywood wants you to hear. This is the side of Blake and Ryan that the cameras were never supposed to catch. It is strange how everything that once looked perfect can suddenly begin to crumble from the inside, and nobody notices until the pieces start falling one by one. The glow of Hollywood lights hides more than it reveals, and when you look closely enough, the cracks begin to show for years. People have seen Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds as the picture of a dream couple. Two stars who seemed untouchable, always laughing, always polished, always standing together. But what if that image was never as perfect as it appeared? What if every smile was part of a performance and the story behind the scenes was far more complicated than anyone could imagine? There are whispers everywhere, soft enough to be denied, yet loud enough to be heard in every corner of Hollywood. Some say it began long before the lawsuits, before the headlines, before the cameras started catching what they were not supposed to see. A strange energy between them, a kind of tension that only those closest to them could sense. And now those whispers have turned into questions about what really goes on when the cameras are off, and what happens when a picture-perfect marriage begins to feel like a movie set that nobody wants to leave but everyone knows is about to end. Blake met Ryan when she was young, still learning how the industry worked, still figuring out who she was supposed to be in the world of fame. And Ryan was already the star, charming, funny, experienced, and confident, the kind of man who could walk into any room and make it his own. People close to them once said she looked at him like he was the answer to everything she wanted. Someone who could guide her, protect her, even shape her career. And Ryan seemed to enjoy being that person, the mentor, the partner, the one in control. It was never loud, never obvious, but those who paid attention could see the way he led every conversation, how he decided which projects were worth it and which ones were not, how he seemed to have an opinion about everything from what she wore to what she said. And yet Blake played her part perfectly. She admired him publicly, laughed at every joke, and spoke about him as if he was her entire world. They became a brand built on their image, their humor, their family, and that brand became powerful, so powerful that even now, with all the talk surrounding them, they still manage to look flawless on the surface. But behind the red carpet, something feels off recently. Ryan has been in the spotlight for a series of unusual comments, the kind that make people wonder if there is something deeper going on. He joked about his family in ways that seemed careless to some, and he told stories that painted his marriage in a strange light. One moment in particular caught everyone's attention. During a conversation about his work on a new documentary, Ryan told an audience that when his wife reminded him to leave for an event, he told her off bluntly. It was meant as a joke. But the timing felt off. The delivery felt heavy, and people started to ask questions. Was it humor, or was it a glimpse of something real, of tension that had been hidden under years of jokes and witty interviews? This moment was small, but it started something, a wave of speculation that grew with every passing day. People noticed that Blake and Ryan were no longer appearing together on red carpets. She wasn't by his side for big premieres, he wasn't attending her events, and suddenly the couple that was everywhere together was nowhere to be found together. That absence created a silence. And silence in Hollywood is never innocent. The internet began to fill the gaps with theories. Some said it was just strategy, a decision to avoid distraction amid the legal case. Others claimed it was something darker, a distance that had been building for years. Some people who had worked around them began to speak, not loudly but quietly, carefully, and their stories painted a picture that was far less glamorous than what the world had been told. One of those people was a photographer who had once covered them during the height of their fame. He described Ryan as controlling someone who needed everything to go his way, who didn't take well to being questioned, and who could be difficult when things didn't align with his vision. The same source said that Blake seemed to mirror him, learning from him, adapting to his methods, until she too became skilled at controlling narratives. The two of them together were unstoppable, but also unpredictable. When they were united, nothing could touch them. But when cracks began to show, they would close ranks and fight back harder. It wasn't just about protecting their image, it was about winning, about never letting anyone see them lose, as this case unfolded, and the spotlight turned toward Blake's legal battle. People started noticing that Ryan was carefully managing how much he said or didn't say about it. He was avoiding her name in interviews, shifting conversations, steering away from questions that could link him too closely to her controversy. It felt like a calculated move, as if he knew one wrong sentence could damage everything he built in marketing and entertainment. While some saw it as distance, others saw it as protection, a way of shielding his own brand until the storm passed. Either way, it created an impression that the couple was not as aligned as they once seemed. When you watch closely, it becomes clear that Ryan has always understood the game of perception. He knows how to craft an image, how to turn a situation into a story that benefits him, and how to laugh off even the most uncomfortable rumors with a joke that makes everyone forget what they just heard. But lately, those jokes haven't been landing. The same way maybe because audiences have started to look past the charm and see the man behind the act. And maybe that's what's making all of this feel different now for Blake. It's been another kind of challenge she's in the middle of. A legal fight that seems to be growing more complicated by the day, and yet her silence speaks louder than any statement she could make. She hasn't addressed the rumors about her marriage or the whispers about the case, and that silence has created even more speculation. People wonder if she's being advised to stay quiet, or if she's choosing not to speak because she doesn't know what to say anymore. What's most striking is how this all feels like a mirror reflecting their entire relationship. Always performing, always controlled, always aware of who's watching. And now that performance seems to be breaking apart, slowly, piece by piece, until only the truth remains, what that truth is. Nobody seems to know for sure, but everyone is waiting to find out. There is something about the silence that makes people uneasy, especially when that silence comes from two people who once shared every detail of their lives with the world for years. Blake and Ryan's love story was a fairy tale constantly on display in interviews, on red carpets, and in magazine spreads. But now that story has gone quiet, and it feels like everyone is waiting for the next scene, wondering what it will reveal. People have started to dig deeper, looking for signs, clues, moments. That might explain when the shift began. One name that keeps resurfacing is Richard Feds, a photographer who spent years observing the couple during public appearances. He once described Ryan as someone who always needed control, someone who dictated the tone of every room he entered, and who saw his wife not as a partner, but as an extension of himself. According to people who have spoken about those years, Ryan would watch every move Blake made on set, every interaction with her co-stars, every interview as if guarding something precious, but not out of love, more out of fear of losing control. And that fear only grew as Blake's fame began to rise. She was young then, still learning how power worked in Hollywood, still figuring out how to build her own name, and Ryan had already built his. By the time she met him, he had a reputation as the funny one, the sharp one, the man everyone wanted to be around. Blake admired that she wanted to match his confidence, his quick wit, his command of the industry, and slowly she began to mold herself into that image, becoming his mirror in more ways than one. Together, they created a partnership that thrived on image management. Their entire relationship became a brand. Every red carpet appearance was perfectly timed, every interview crafted to remind people how in love they were, how strong they were, how normal they were despite being two of the biggest stars in the world. But what happens when a brand begins to show its cracks? What happens when the story that once sold millions no longer fits the truth inside of it? As this legal case has unfolded, more and more people are questioning the motives behind it. Some believe it is less about justice and more about control, that it was never just Blake's decision to move forward with such a high-profile case, but part of a bigger plan to manage perception. A way to shift focus away from professional setbacks and toward a narrative that could generate sympathy and protection from criticism. Sources who worked near them describe Ryan as being deeply involved behind the scenes of everything, even legal strategy, always ensuring that whatever happened publicly aligned with the version of the story he wanted the world to see. And that version often placed him at the center as the protector, the businessman, the man who could fix anything. But as pressure mounted, his usual charm began to wear thin. His interviews became erratic. His jokes sounded forced, and his public comments started to feel less like humor and more like thinly veiled frustration. When he told a story about arguing with Blake on the phone during a professional moment, some laughed, but others felt uncomfortable. It seemed like a glimpse into a private world that wasn't as balanced as it once appeared, and then came the questions. Why would he share that? Why would he bring his wife into a story that made him sound dismissive of her? It was as if he had forgotten that the world was still listening, or perhaps he wanted them to hear it. Perhaps it was his way of reminding everyone that he was still in control, even when the narrative was slipping away. Meanwhile, Blake stayed silent, choosing to let others speculate rather than giving them something. Real to hold on to that silence is powerful, but it also tells its own story, because in Hollywood, silence can either be strength or surrender, and no one is quite sure which one this is. The people who have watched their careers evolve over the years say that this isn't new, that their relationship has always functioned like a carefully choreographed act. Even in private moments, Ryan has been described as meticulous about how they are perceived, from how they dress to what they post online. To when they appear together, the timing is always strategic. Every detail designed to reinforce the image of the perfect couple, the couple that never fights, never falters, never cracks. But the truth is that nobody can maintain that kind of perfection. Forever, eventually real life creeps in and the performance begins to falter. Some insiders say that Ryan's desire for control stems from insecurity, that he has always feared being overshadowed by his partners, that when his first marriage ended, it left him determined to never let that happen again, and when Blake came into his life, it felt like a second chance to build something unbreakable. But the problem with building something unbreakable is that it often means nothing can move nothing, can breathe, and eventually it starts to suffocate everyone inside of it. Those who have followed the story closely believe that Blake has slowly realized how much of her life has been shaped around his control, around his strategies, his plans, his opinions. Even her public image seems tied to his brand. She mirrors his humor, his tone, his approach to social media, because that's what their audience expects from them as a couple, and that expectation has become its own kind of trap. This current legal battle has only magnified that dynamic. Insiders claim that Ryan is deeply invested, not only emotionally but financially, in making sure it plays out in his favor, not because of what it means for Blake, but because of what it means for him. For his reputation, for his business, for the empire of marketing and image that he has built over the past decade, it is said that he sees the situation not just as a legal matter, but as a campaign, a narrative war. And that is why he has poured so much money and energy into maintaining control. But there is one problem. No matter how carefully you craft a story, there comes a point when reality begins to break through. When too many people start noticing the same patterns, the same inconsistencies, and the same silences that cannot be explained away. The people who once photographed them together now say the tension is visible in every frame. Her body turned slightly away, his smile too tight, his eyes watching her. More than the camera, it is subtle, but it is there. And for those who know what to look for, it speaks volumes. Still, what makes this story so fascinating is that it isn't just about one couple or one marriage. It's about how far people will go to protect an illusion. How fame can blur the line between love and performance, until even the people inside it can't tell which one is real. Maybe Blake still believes in the story they created. Maybe she still thinks that if she holds on long enough, it will go back to what it once was. But maybe Ryan knows the truth, that the story is already slipping away, and no amount of control can bring it back. In the end, what makes this story unforgettable is not the fame or the fortune or even the scandal. It is the fragility of the illusion that so many believed in. Because for years, Blake and Ryan were the picture of everything people wanted to see in love. Effortless, beautiful, untouchable. And now that image stands at the edge of collapse. It reminds everyone watching that even the brightest lights in Hollywood can flicker. That even the most carefully crafted stories can fracture under the weight of truth. Maybe they will find a way back. Maybe they will reinvent the narrative once more. Because if there is one thing they both understand better than anyone else, it is how to turn pain into performance. But there is also a quiet part of this story that feels final. A sense that something has changed forever. Not just for them, but for how people will look at them from now on. Maybe this is not the end of their story, but the beginning of a new one. Stripped of the perfection, stripped of the illusion. A story that finally reveals who they really are beneath the glare of the spotlight.